Hi, it's Dorothy Guinan with Scrapbooking Quebec. I'm back with video 5 in my 7-part mini-series, Power Scrapping. In this series, I'm sharing a fun and fast, streamlined approach to using collections. So far, I've organized and introduced my kit, 49 and Market Sunburst collection, along with Stash, and I created one layout on YouTube. The layout I created in the last video was a focal point page, a fancy page that takes a bit more time to create. In today's video, I'm going to be creating a complementary page. I call them page 2 designs. They are quick and easy to create and pair well with fancier pages. I'm going to be using a Simple Stories 9-block grid template. The layout designs I'm sharing in this series are designs that can be easily repeated over and over again with different material, colors, photos, and stories. The result will look different each time. It's part of the streamlined approach that I'm teaching in this series. You will see examples of this in my layout share at the end of this series. So let's get scrapping. If you're following along in this series, I'm using page pack number 2. So you can see on the table, I have a focal point page. I did not do this one on YouTube, but I did follow the design that I created in video 3. So you can see on the foundation page, I cut out a big circle. I backed it in blue cardstock. Beneath the photo, I created a shelf with embellishments. Now, I didn't add the envelope. I had added that into the design, but in the end, I decided not to go with it. To be perfectly honest with this page, I had a terrible time. When I cut out that circle, I made a mistake. Then I had to try to recut it out. And from there on, it was like I was covering up mistake after mistake. Anyways, I persevered and I'm really happy I did because I'm quite thrilled with the results, especially after the page 2 design that I create in this video. So I'm showing you the sketch that I created in video 3. So the focal point was on the left. On the right, the page that I'll be creating today, it's a grid layout. I'm showing you that in advance I trimmed down 8 photos. So these are all squares. Basically, they were printed at 4x3 using the Project Life app, and I'll talk about how I cut them later on in this video. So the paper is what I have left over after creating my focal point page. In this tray, I have a bunch of embellishments. Now, for this Sunburst collection, I had bought 3 embellishment packs, some ephemera, some laser cut pieces, along with some chipboard titles. So what I have here are narrowed down pieces, basically by color. In addition to that, I showed you a moment ago a punch on the original page. I did punch out some leaves with some scrap cardstock. So I got out the punch in case I have to punch out some more leaves. What I'm going to do right now is create the grid. So on my original design, I had planned to use that blue paper as my foundation layer because it adds a nice contrast to the focal point page. What I want to do right now is create a mat for my grid. So you saw me put my grid template in the trimmer. That's because I was measuring it, and now I'm cutting out that green paper in the very same size. So that is 10 1/8 of an inch. So what that will do is serve as a base layer for my photos. Now I could adhere the photos directly to the blue cardstock. I find it steps it up a bit by adding a contrasting color underneath the grid. So that's what I'm doing. Now what I will do is add a little bit of ink to this block. So the ink I'm using is Morning Mist by Versifying Claire, and I'm not going to make you watch all of that. But in a moment, I'm going to come back and start playing with the grid. Now the first thing I want to talk about is how I cut my squares. For my photos measure 2 7/8 of an inch. You can see some of them are matted, not all of them. That's because I want to talk about how I cut my squares. When I have square dies and I'm creating a grid, I use them because each time I cut out the square, they are identical in size. So for my photos, I cut out them using the square die that measures 2 7/8 of an inch. But the grid has 3-inch squares and I do not have a 3-inch square die. So instead of using a die, you can see on my trimmer, I have that mint low tack tape. That's from the scrapbook.com. I use it all the time. Anyway, I put a line of that at the 3-inch mark, and when I went to cut my mats, I bumped it up against this tape, and I did it for all of them. And what that did was gave me a guide to cut out identical size squares. Squares are easy to cut out, but when you have to cut out 9 identical squares, it is very easy to have a few discrepancies in size. But by putting that tape on your trimmer as a guide, it really helps you cut out identical size squares. So I finished matting my photos, and now what I'm going to do is secure this template on top of that green block. I don't want it to move when I adhere my photos. So what I will do is play around with the placement a bit just to make sure I like how it looks. Now, what I like to do when I'm placing is that if there are any angles in the photos, I like them angling in towards the middle. These photos are very difficult to describe in that way, but I will describe it in another way. If I had a person who was looking towards the left, I would place that photo on the right. That way, they would be looking towards the inside of the page. I hope that explanation made sense. So as you can see, I've moved ahead and I'm adhering all of my photos through the blocks in that template. And by using the template, it gives me a nice even guide to place these photos. The margins in between the photos are all identical in distance, and I absolutely love that. So I ran out of tape there. I had to fill up my tape runner. Now it's all done. You see me lift up the photo there in the middle left. For some reason, my margin didn't look right to me, but nevertheless, it was quite an easy fix. So now you see me adhering the big block right in the middle on top of that blue cardstock, and I'm happy with that. Now, obviously, I have an empty block in the middle there. I'm going to fill that up with embellishing. The first thing I'm going to do is fill it up with paper. Now you can do different things here. You could use a title there. You could add journaling there. You could leave it blank. You could add embellishing without a block. I'm going to add a block. You also may notice that I am now placing my grid on the left-hand side as opposed to on the right, like I had originally planned. And that's just what I do. When I create these designs for power scrapping, I create them quickly. The whole point of this series is to do things quickly. I do things kind of on gut feelings, knowing that I can change my mind throughout the process. And sometimes I do, but usually I stick quite close to my plan, quite close to my gut instinct feeling in the first place. As you can see, I cut myself out a block of paper. That came from the paper from that circle that I cut out from the original page there. So I just used a scrap of that to fill in that block. And now I'm getting out my embellishing. So as I mentioned earlier, I had already narrowed down my choices for this. And what I'm going to do is kind of create a repetition of the embellishment clusters that are over on the original page, on the focal point page. So I'm using those big punched out leaves. I'm using some of those palm leaves that were part of that laser cut embellishment pack. I'm coming in with a few pink flowers that are quite obvious on the focal point page as well. So again, I am just repeating what is on the original page, but obviously on a much smaller scale. Now, if my grid had 7 photos, I would be filling in 2 blocks, or if it had 6 photos, I would be filling in 3 blocks. So basically, you know, you can change up the look of the grid every time you use it. In my case, I am just filling up one simple block in the middle. Now, when I go to adhere this, I know I want some finishing touches, but I am adhering the bulk of my embellishment cluster down, and then I will come in with a few finishing touches. I just find it easier that way. When everything is loose on my page, it's hard for me to see the finished layout. When I adhere this for one of the three pink flowers, I do pop it up on foam adhesive. I do it with the smallest flower, and I do come in with some foam adhesive and pop up the tips of those punched out leaves as well. And all that does is add a little bit of lift and interest to that embellishment cluster. Now I want to add some finishing touches. So on the original page, just above the title, there is a black word banner. I think it says "On This Day." I kind of want to repeat that on my grid somewhere. So I was additioning a few different black pieces. I don't want it to take up a huge amount of impact. I'm actually quite liking how my grid looks right now. What I am looking to do, however, is add a visual triangle. You can see I have a little pink flower in the top right of my grid. I don't like that. I like my grid how it looks, but I do want a visual triangle. And to me, that pink is jumping out. So to me, that seems like the most obvious color to create a visual triangle with. However, I am having a little bit of trouble. You can see I've tucked a few just above the word explore on the focal point page. I like that, but I'm not liking the flower that was just above the word sunkissed that I had put on the original page. So to fix that, I removed that pink flower, bumped it up with the other flower just above the word explore, and in doing so, I end up with three separate areas across the two pages with pink flowers, and that created a visual triangle. Now, I will often do that. I will tweak pages when I create complementary pages. I end up having to tweak sometimes the original page, just like I did in this video. Also, off camera, all I ended up doing was adhering those little black words just in the middle block on that grid, on the top middle block that says "just add water." And that black kind of repeats the black that you see in the words on the complementary page just above the title as well. So basically that's it. So just to review, the page design I shared today can be used over and over again. You can change up the look by using fewer photos, filling in the blank spots with paper, embellishments, journaling. You can replace the squares with hearts or circles. And above all, this classic grid pairs perfectly with focal point pages every time. The next video in this series will be a layout process video for a double page spread, hopefully next week. If you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, Scrapbooking Quebec, I would love it if you did. And if you are a subscriber, thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon on YouTube. Bye-bye.